The starship Viridian Glory hung in the darkness of space like a dying ember. Its sleek hull, made from materials that could withstand the heat of a star's corona, now flickered with failing emergency lights. Inside the command deck, Captain Thexin of the Corvani Empire stared at the damage reports scrolling across holographic displays, each line of text more damning than the last. Engineering reports total failure of the quantum drive core, announced Officer Kelma, her four eyes blinking in sequence as she processed the incoming data. Backup systems are offline. Life support is running on emergency power only. Thexin's mandibles clicked together in frustration. The Corvani were one of the most advanced species in the known galaxy. Their ships crossed distances that would take other civilizations centuries in mere days. Their technology was the envy of 1,000 worlds. And yet here they were, stranded in an unmarked system, powerless and vulnerable. "How long until life support fails?" Thexin asked, though he already suspected the answer would not bring comfort. 72 hours, perhaps less, Kelma replied. "The cascade failure damaged more systems than we initially thought. The repair drones cannot access the core. The damage is too extensive." The captain looked around his bridge. 15 crew members, all of them brilliant in their respective fields, all of them trained on the most sophisticated equipment in the galaxy. But training meant following protocols, using tools designed for specific purposes, working within systems that had been perfected over millennia. When those systems failed completely, when the tools themselves were damaged beyond use, their expertise became limited. "What is the status of our distress beacon?" Thexin asked. "Broadcasting on all standard frequencies," replied Communications Officer Jendi. "However, we are far from established trade routes. This system appeared empty on our charts. The chances of another Corvani vessel passing through this sector within our life support window are approximately 0.3%. Thexin felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. He had led crews through spatial anomalies, navigated diplomatic incidents that nearly sparked wars, survived encounters with hostile species. But this was different. This was not an enemy he could outthink, or a puzzle he could solve with superior technology. This was simple mechanical failure in the worst possible location. "Are there any inhabited worlds in this system?" he asked. Kelma manipulated her console, pulling up sensor data. "Yes, Captain. One planet, third from the star. Our sensors indicate a developing civilization. They appear to be an early space age. Primitive chemical rockets, radio communications, no quantum signatures." "No quantum capability?" Thexin repeated. A civilization without quantum technology was at least 500 years behind the Corvani, possibly more. Such a species would be useless for their situation. They would have no understanding of the Viridian Glory systems, no tools capable of interfacing with quantum-level engineering. "Correct, Captain. However, they do have satellites in what appear to be space stations in orbit. They have achieved basic spaceflight." Thexin considered this information. Galactic law prohibited extensive contact with developing civilizations. The prime directive of the Corvani Empire was clear on this point. Interference with natural development was forbidden. But galactic law also had provisions for emergency situations, and surely this qualified. "What do we know about this species?" he asked. Jendi accessed the ship's database. "Very little, Captain. This system is not on our regular charts. Preliminary scans indicate the dominant species calls themselves humans. They are carbon-based, bipedal, similar environmental requirements to our own. Their planet designation in their own language appears to be Earth." "Humans," Thexin repeated, testing the word. "Can we establish communication?" "Their radio technology is crude but functional. We could broadcast a message they would receive, though our translators would need time to decode their languages." The captain made his decision. They had no other options. Even if these humans could not help them repair the Viridian Glory, perhaps they could provide basic supplies. enough to extend their life support while they waited for rescue that might never come. Broadcast a distress signal on their radio frequencies. Include mathematical progressions to indicate intelligence. We need to make contact. The crew worked quickly, translating their situation into a format that a pre-quantum civilization might understand. It took several hours, but eventually they had a message ready. Jendi sent it out across all frequencies the humans seemed to use. Then they waited. The response came faster than anyone expected. Within 3 hours, their sensors detected multiple launches from the planet's surface. Small craft, burning chemical fuel, accelerating toward their position. "They are sending ships," Kelma announced, surprise evident in her voice. "Multiple vessels. They appear to be converging on our location." Thexin felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. What could these primitive beings possibly do to help them? But at least they were trying. At least someone had heard their call. "Prepare to receive visitors," he ordered. "Activate universal translators, and someone find our first contact protocols. We are about to make history, though perhaps not in the way any of us imagined." The human ships were unlike anything the Corvani had seen in active use for centuries. They were loud, inefficient, and produced enormous amounts of waste heat. But they were also functional, and as the Corvani watched them approach, there was something almost endearing about their determination. These humans had heard a call for help and responded immediately, despite the obvious technological gap between their civilizations. The lead ship docked with the Viridian Glory using a flexible tunnel that appeared to be reinforced fabric. Thexin had to admit it was clever in its simplicity. No complex force fields or quantum bonding, just a pressurized tube. The airlock cycled, and the first human stepped aboard. He was shorter than Thexin had expected, perhaps 1.5 meters tall, wearing a bulky white suit that completely enclosed his body. The suit was clearly primitive, offering basic protection rather than the sophisticated environmental control the Corvani took for granted. But the human moved with confidence, and when he removed his helmet, his face showed no fear, only curiosity and concern. "I'm Commander Jake Rodriguez of the International Space Station," the human said, his words translated instantly by the Corvani systems. "We received your distress call. What do you need?" Thexin found himself impressed despite the situation. This human had traveled through the vacuum of space in what amounted to little more than a protective bag, docked with an alien vessel of unknown design, and now stood calmly discussing the situation. There was a courage in that which transcended technology. "I am Captain Thexin," he replied, noticing how his own voice sounded in the human's language after translation. "Our ship has suffered catastrophic systems failure. Our quantum drive core is damaged beyond our ability to repair. We have approximately 68 hours of life support remaining." Jake's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "Quantum drive. I'm not going to pretend I know what that is, but drive core sounds universal enough. You've got engine trouble." "Yes," Thexin confirmed, "though I fear the complexity of our systems is far beyond anything your civilization has encountered." To his surprise, Jake smiled. "Maybe, maybe not. You'd be surprised what a good mechanic can figure out. Mind if I take a look? I've got a team with me, best engineers and technicians we could scramble on short notice." Thexin hesitated. The quantum drive core was technology these humans could not possibly comprehend. It manipulated space-time at the quantum level, creating controlled bubbles of altered physics that allowed faster-than-light travel. The mathematics alone required understanding of 17-dimensional space. The tools needed to work on it required quantum entanglement and precision at the atomic level. But what choice did they have? "Follow me," Thexin said. "I will take you to engineering." As they walked through the corridors of the Viridian Glory, more humans arrived. They came in their clumsy suits, carrying cases of tools that looked absurdly primitive compared to the ship's sophisticated systems. But they moved with purpose, these humans, and they asked questions constantly. Not stupid questions, Thexan noted, but practical ones. What systems were working? What had failed? What happened before the failure? In engineering, Chief Engineer Lorvan stood amid the wreckage of the quantum core. Components that should have been perfectly aligned floated at odd angles, held in place by failing magnetic fields. Energy conduits sparked and flickered. The whole space smelled of ozone and melted polymers. Jake whistled, a sound the translator did not attempt to convert. "That's a mess," he said. Then he turned to his team. "All right, folks. I know this looks like something out of science fiction, because it is, but engines are engines. Power is power. Things move, things connect. Energy flows from here to there. Same principles apply whether it's a car or a spaceship. Let's figure this out." The other humans nodded and began unpacking their equipment. Thexan watched in fascination as they produced wrenches, screwdrivers, measuring devices with glowing screens, and what appeared to be a handheld computer of some kind. Everything looked so basic, so mechanical. How could these tools possibly interface with quantum-level technology? But then something strange happened. One of the humans, a woman who introduced herself as Engineer Riley Chen, approached the core and simply looked at it. Really looked at it, not at a display or readout, but at the physical components themselves. "This coupling here," she said, pointing at a junction where three energy conduits met. "It's misaligned. See how the field isn't symmetrical? Something knocked it out of position." Lorvan pulled up his diagnostic display. "The field asymmetry is within tolerances," he said. "The error is only 0.003%. "In a system this precise," Riley said, 0.003% might as well be a mile off. That tiny error propagates through the whole system. Everything downstream has to compensate, which stresses other components, which causes more errors, until you get a cascade failure." She was right. Lorvan checked his readings again, going deeper into the system diagnostics than he had before. The coupling misalignment had indeed been the starting point of the cascade. But how had this human, with her basic tools and primitive understanding, seen what he had missed? "You are correct," Lorvan admitted, "but the coupling cannot be realigned without quantum calibration tools, which were damaged in the cascade." Riley smiled. "Maybe we don't need to be that precise. What if we could get it close enough? Would the system self-correct the tiny remaining errors?" Thexan felt something stir in his chest, an unfamiliar feeling. Was it hope? Human mechanics had arrived, and perhaps the Viridian Glory's crew had underestimated what determination and fresh perspective could accomplish. The next hours would tell whether human ingenuity could bridge a gap of 500 years of technological development. Captain Thexan found himself actually believing it might be possible. The human team spread throughout engineering like water finding cracks in stone. They moved between the damaged systems with an organized chaos that seemed contradictory yet effective. While the Corvani crew watched with a mixture of skepticism and desperate hope, the humans discussed ideas in rapid-fire exchanges that the translators sometimes struggled to keep pace with. "Tom, check the power flow through that conduit," Jake called out to a human examining what the Corvani called a plasma distribution node. "If we can reroute around the damaged sections, we might restore partial function." Tom, a stocky man with gray hair and grease already somehow on his suit, despite being aboard for less than an hour, nodded and pulled out a device that appeared to measure electrical current. He touched probes to various points on the Corvani equipment, watching numbers scroll across a small screen. "Getting weird readings," Tom announced. "This thing is putting out power, but it's fluctuating, like it can't decide what it wants to be doing." Lorvan approached with his own diagnostic tool, a device that could measure quantum states and read data directly from the ship's systems. The plasma frequency is unstable. It should oscillate at exactly 9.73 gigahertz, but the cascade damage has disrupted the resonance chamber. Tom looked at his simple multimeter, then at Lorvan's sophisticated scanner. 9.73 gigahertz. That's in the microwave range, right? We work with frequencies like that on Earth. Radar systems, communications equipment, different application, same basic physics. He pulled out another tool, this one looking like a small handheld device with a screen and an antenna. This is a spectrum analyzer. Basic stuff for us, but it'll show the frequency output. Let me see what we're actually getting here. Tom held the device near the fluctuating component and watched the display. Yeah, you've got harmonics all over the place. Your signal's dirty. Something in the resonance chamber must be damaged, throwing off the precise frequency you need. The resonance chamber cannot be opened without a clean room environment, Lorvan explained. The quantum matrices inside are sensitive to the slightest contamination. Even a single molecule of foreign material could disrupt the quantum entanglement. Riley had been listening while examining another section of the core. What if we don't open it? What if we tune it from the outside? Mechanical resonance responds to external forcing. If we can apply the right frequency input from outside the chamber, we might be able to pull it back into proper resonance. Lorvan's mandibles clicked skeptically. The mathematics of such an operation would be extraordinarily complex. We would need to calculate the exact forcing function, account for all harmonics, predict the system's response through 17 dimensions of quantum space. Or, Riley said, pulling out a laptop computer from her equipment case, we could try different inputs and measure the response. Experimental approach. Keep adjusting until we get it right. The Corvani engineer looked horrified. Trial and error? With a quantum resonance chamber? The risk of making the damage worse is substantial. So's the risk of doing nothing, Jake interjected. Look, I get it. This is sophisticated equipment. Your people have refined it over centuries, maybe longer. But sometimes the sophisticated solution isn't available, and you've got to work with what you have. We might break it worse, sure, but from where we're standing, it's already broken. What have you got to lose? Thexin had been observing the exchange in silence. The human logic was crude, but undeniable. The Viridian glory was dead in space. Traditional repair methods had failed. They could cling to proper procedures and die according to regulations, or they could let these strange aliens with their primitive tools try something unconventional. Proceed, Thexin decided, but carefully. Riley set up her laptop, connecting it through a series of adapters to the Viridian Glory's systems. The Corvani computers, designed to interface with quantum-level sensors and controls, had never encountered anything quite like human technology. But electricity was electricity, and signals were signals. With some creative wiring that made Lorvan wince, Riley established a basic connection. Okay, she said, her fingers moving across the keyboard. Tom, keep watching that spectrum analyzer. I'm going to send different frequency patterns through the system. You tell me what happens to the output. Ready, Tom confirmed. Riley typed commands, and deep within the quantum resonance chamber, magnetic coils began pulsing with patterns they had never been designed to produce. The Corvani crew held their breath, waiting for either catastrophic failure or miraculous success. Output's changing, Tom reported. Still messy, but I'm seeing some response to your input. Good, that means we can influence it. Riley adjusted her program, trying different patterns. The resonance chamber wants to stabilize. It's designed to lock onto a specific frequency. We just need to give it a strong enough push in the right direction. For 20 minutes she experimented, sending signals and measuring responses. The Corvani watched in fascination as this human, working with tools that would have been considered obsolete 5 centuries ago on their world, gradually coaxed their advanced quantum system toward stability. There, Tom said suddenly. That pattern, do that again. Riley repeated the input. The spectrum analyzer showed the chaotic harmonics beginning to align, pulled into order by the external forcing. It's working, Lorvan whispered, checking his own instruments. The resonance is stabilizing. How is this possible? Because resonance is resonance, Riley explained while maintaining her input pattern. Doesn't matter if it's a bell, a bridge, or a quantum chamber. You hit the right frequency, apply it with the right amplitude, and the system responds. We're just speaking your equipment's language in a really basic dialect. The quantum resonance chamber locked into proper frequency. Throughout engineering, systems that had been dark began showing signs of life. Display screens flickered on. Energy conduits stopped sparking and began glowing with steady light. The ship itself seemed to sigh with relief, but the celebration was premature. "Captain," Kelma's voice came over the communication system. "We have a new problem. The resonance chamber is stable, but the power distribution network is still damaged. We're generating power but cannot route it properly to the drive core. Multiple conduits are fused shut from the cascade overload." Jake walked over to examine the conduits in question. They were complex tubes of crystalline material that somehow channeled plasma without physical contact, using magnetic fields to contain superheated matter. Several of them were indeed fused, their internal channels blocked by solidified plasma and damaged magnetic coils. "Can you replace them?" Jake asked. "Not without parts we do not have," Thexin replied. "These conduits are grown in orbital facilities, manufactured to atomic precision. They cannot be replicated with anything we have aboard." Jake ran his hand along one of the damaged conduits, feeling its surface. "But you've got other conduits that are working, right? Same basic function, just in different parts of the ship?" "Yes," Lorvan confirmed. "But they are already in use. We cannot simply remove them without losing other critical systems." "What if we rerouted power through systems that aren't critical right now?" another human suggested. This was Chen Wei, a young man who had been quietly studying the ship's layout on his tablet computer. "You don't need every system at full power while you're sitting still in space. Life support, sure. Computers, okay. But what about things like the artificial gravity in the cargo holds? Or the defensive shields? Can you temporarily cannibalize power conduits from non-essential systems?" The Corvani crew exchanged glances. It was such a crude approach, such an inelegant solution. Corvani engineering emphasized integrated systems, everything working together in carefully calculated harmony. The idea of deliberately disrupting that harmony, even temporarily, went against every principle they had been taught. But it would work. "It would work," Lorvan admitted reluctantly. "We would be operating far outside normal parameters. Many systems would be offline or running at minimal capacity. The ship would be vulnerable." "But the ship would move," Jake said. "And moving beats sitting here waiting to run out of air, right?" Thexin made the decision quickly. "Do it. Remove conduits from non-critical systems and reroute power to the drive core. We can repair things properly once we reach a facility." What followed was several hours of work that would have given any Corvani safety inspector a breakdown. The human team, working alongside increasingly convinced Corvani engineers, began physically removing power conduits from various systems throughout the ship. They bypassed safety interlocks that were designed never to be bypassed. They created power distribution networks that existed nowhere in the Viridian Glory's documentation. And it was working. Tom proved particularly valuable during this phase. His experience with electrical systems, though primitive by Corvani standards, gave him an intuitive understanding of how power flowed. He could look at a junction and immediately see the most efficient path, could identify bottlenecks and suggest solutions. "You're running too much current through this connection," he told Lorvan at one point, indicating a junction where 6 conduits met. "That's why it keeps heating up. Split the load between 2 paths instead of 1. Yeah, I know it's less efficient mathematically, but efficiency doesn't matter if the thing melts." Lorvan made the adjustment, and the junction temperature dropped immediately into safe ranges. The chief engineer was beginning to understand something profound. The humans did not know quantum physics. They could not calculate 17-dimensional matrices. They had never heard of half the technologies aboard the Viridian Glory. But they understood practical problem-solving in a way the Corvani had forgotten. Centuries of refined technology had made the Corvani dependent on their tools, on their perfect systems, on solutions that existed in design databases. When those tools failed, when the databases offered no answers, they were lost. The humans, conversely, seemed to expect things to break. They planned for failure. Their entire approach to engineering was built around the assumption that nothing would work perfectly, so you had to be creative and adaptive. It was messy and inelegant and completely effective. Power flow is restored, Kelma announced from her station. Drive core is receiving energy. All quantum matrices are coming online. Riley monitored her laptop, still connected to the resonance chamber. Harmonics are stable. Whatever we did, it's holding together. Jake looked at Thexan. Okay, Captain. That's about all we can do from here. The rest is up to your people. Can you get the drive working? Thexan moved to the main engineering console and began the initialization sequence for the quantum drive. Warning messages cascaded across the display, noting the dozens of irregularities in the system, the countless deviations from standard operating parameters. Under normal circumstances, he would never attempt to activate the drive in such a state. These were not normal circumstances. Activating quantum field generators, Thexan announced. Throughout the ship, the generators spun up, creating the precise mathematical patterns in space-time that would allow faster-than-light travel. The Viridian glory shuddered as quantum fields enveloped its hull. Field stability at 92%, Kelma reported. Below optimal, but within functional range. That's good enough, Thexan said. Plotting course for the nearest Corvani facility. Distance, 37 light-years. At reduced drive capacity, travel time will be approximately 14 hours. Life support? Lorvan asked. Sufficient for 30 hours with current power allocation. Thexan input the final commands, and the Viridian glory began to move. Not with the smooth grace it normally possessed, but with a stuttering, uncertain motion that nonetheless carried them away from this unnamed system and towards safety. The human team erupted in cheers, a sound of pure triumph that the Corvani crew found themselves joining despite their usual reserved nature. The quantum drive engaged, and the stars shifted. They were traveling faster than light once more, limping home on repairs that no Corvani engineer would have ever considered attempting. Repairs made possible by humans who barely understood the technology they had fixed. Jake floated in the engineering bay, watching the Corvani crew work to stabilize the jury-rigged systems. His team had gathered around him, their faces showing exhaustion, but also deep satisfaction. You have saved our lives, Thexan said, approaching the human commander. We owe you a debt that cannot be easily repaid. Jake shook his head, smiling. You don't owe us anything, Captain. You sent out a distress call. We answered. That's what people do, right? Help each other when things go bad. Your people are remarkable, Thexan continued. You approach problems we thought unsolvable with methods we never considered. You fix technology you did not understand using tools we would consider obsolete. How is this possible? Riley, who was packing up her laptop, answered the question. Because we've had to. Look, Captain, you've got amazing technology, centuries ahead of us, maybe more. But you know what we've got? We've got equipment that breaks down all the time. We've got spacecraft held together with duct tape and hope. We've got systems that weren't designed to work together, forced to cooperate because we had no other choice. We learned to improvise because improvisation is all we have. Yeah, Tom added, coiling up cables. You folks have perfected everything, but perfection makes you brittle. When something breaks, you need the exact right part, the exact right procedure. We're used to things being broken. We expect it, so we've gotten good at fixing things with whatever we have on hand. It is a valuable skill, Lorvan admitted, one that we have perhaps lost in our pursuit of technological excellence. We have become dependent on our systems working perfectly, and when they do not, we find ourselves helpless. Jake clapped the Corvani engineer on the shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie that transcended species. Maybe we can learn from each other. You've got the advanced knowledge. We've got the practical experience. Combine those, and you'd really have something special. Fexen considered this. First contact protocols were clear. Interaction with developing species should be minimal, carefully controlled, designed to prevent cultural contamination. But protocols also said nothing about developing species saving Corvani lives through ingenuity and determination. Perhaps the protocols needed updating. When we reach the Corvani facility, Fexen said, I will be filing a full report on this incident. I will recommend that formal contact be established with humanity. Your people deserve recognition from the galactic community. Whoa, hold on, Jake said quickly. We're not sure we're ready for that. We've got enough problems figuring out how to get along with each other on one planet. Adding aliens to the mix might be more than we can handle right now. Then at the very least, allow us to share technology with you. Medical advances, energy production methods, materials science. We could accelerate your development by centuries. But Jake was shaking his head again. Appreciate the offer, really. But I think we need to develop at our own pace. Learn things ourselves, make our own mistakes. Getting handed advanced technology might help in the short term, but it could hurt us long term. We wouldn't really understand it, you know. We'd be dependent on you, the way you're dependent on your perfect systems. Fexen felt admiration growing for these strange humans. They had the wisdom to refuse gifts that most species would desperately want. They understood something that the Corvani, for all their advancement, had forgotten. That the journey of discovery was as important as the destination. You are a wise people, Fexen said. Though you do not yet travel the stars as we do, you have qualities that many spacefaring civilizations lack. We're just folks trying to do the right thing, Riley said, though I wouldn't mind some blueprints for that quantum resonance chamber once we're more advanced. That's a sweet piece of engineering. The Corvani crew and the human team worked together for the next several hours, making sure all the improvised repairs would hold until they reached the facility. The humans shared stories of their own close calls in space, times when quick thinking had prevented disaster. The Corvani found themselves laughing at descriptions of problems being fixed with tape, wire, and what Jake called aggressive engineering. As they worked, Chenwei approached Lorvan with a question. Can I ask you something? Why didn't your repair systems work? You've got to have redundancies, backup plans. A ship this advanced shouldn't be killed by one cascade failure. Lorvan's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. We do have redundancies, multiple layers of them, but the cascade occurred so quickly and was so comprehensive that every backup system was overwhelmed before it could engage. It is a scenario that our engineers calculated had only a 0.0001% chance of occurring. So you didn't really plan for it because the odds were so low it seemed impossible. Correct. Chen laughed, though not unkindly. We've got a saying back on Earth. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. We call it Murphy's Law. The more complex a system, the more ways it can fail, and eventually, all of them will fail at the worst possible time. So we plan for everything to break, even the impossible stuff. A pessimistic view of engineering, Lorvan observed. Maybe, or maybe just realistic. Either way, it keeps us ready for days like today. The journey to the Corvani facility continued without major incident, though there were several tense moments when improvised repairs threatened to fail. Each time, the combined Corvani and human teams found solutions, often mixing sophisticated quantum monitoring with basic human common sense. Tom at one point used a simple rubber mallet from his toolkit to adjust a misaligned power coupling, something that horrified the Corvani engineers until it actually worked. Sometimes, Tom explained, you need precision instruments. Sometimes you need a hammer. Knowing which is the art of engineering. As they approached their destination, Jake gathered his team together. All right, folks, We're going to be dropping off our new friends and heading home. But before we do, I want you all to understand what we accomplished here. We just made first contact with an alien species. Real, actual aliens. And we did it not as conquerors or victims, but as helpers. As people who saw someone in trouble and stepped up. That's something to be proud of. The team nodded, the weight of what they had done finally settling on them. They had not just saved lives today, they had represented humanity to an advanced alien civilization, and they had done it well. Thexan approached as they prepared to depart. We are entering orbit around the facility. Our engineers will take over from here. But before you leave, I want you to know that you have changed how I view humanity. I came into this situation assuming your people had nothing to offer us. I was wrong. You have something we have lost. The ability to adapt, to improvise, to find solutions when the perfect answer is not available. That is worth more than all the quantum technology in the galaxy. Thanks, Captain, Jake said, extending his hand. Thexan took it, understanding the human gesture of respect. And hey, maybe in a few years when we've got our own quantum drives, we'll come visit you properly. Maybe even show you some of our engineering tricks. I would welcome that, Thexan said sincerely. The galaxy needs more people who can think the way humans do. Too many species have become like us, dependent on technology to solve all problems. You remember that problems are solved by thinking first, tools second. The human team returned to their spacecraft, their clumsy but functional vessels that had crossed the void to answer a distress call. As they departed, the Corvani crew stood at the viewports, watching them go. Do you think they will develop quickly? Kelma asked Thexan. I think they will develop at exactly the pace they need to, the captain replied. And when they do reach the stars in force, they will bring with them something the galaxy desperately needs: practical wisdom. The understanding that sophisticated tools are useless without flexible minds to wield them. The Viridian Glory docked with the Corvani facility, where teams of engineers swarmed over it, examining the improvised repairs with wonder and horror in equal measure. The chief facility engineer, a veteran named Scorvin, pulled Thexan aside after the initial inspection. Captain, these repairs, they should not work. They violate every principle of quantum engineering. Your power distribution network is held together with connections that are not even in our parts database. Some of these components are wired backwards. There is a primitive electromagnetic device attached directly to your resonance chamber that appears to be made from copper wire and iron cores. This is madness. And yet, Thexan said calmly, it brought us here safely. But how? Because the humans who made these repairs understood something we had forgotten. They understood that engineering is not about perfect solutions from a database. It is about solving problems with whatever resources are available. It is about creativity and adaptation. Scorvin looked at the schematic of the repairs, shaking his head. We will need weeks to restore this ship to proper specifications. Do so, Thexan said, but keep detailed records of what the humans did. Study their methods. There is much we can learn from them. Over the following days, as the Viridian Glory underwent proper repairs, word of the incident spread through the Corvani Empire. The story of humans with primitive tools repairing advanced quantum technology became famous, told in engineering circles with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Some Corvani engineers began experimenting with the human approach, deliberately trying to solve problems without perfect tools, forcing themselves to improvise. It was uncomfortable at first, working without proper equipment, making do with approximations instead of precision. But they found it also freed them from rigid thinking, opened possibilities they had never considered. A movement began, small at first but growing. Corvani educators started teaching improvisation alongside precision. Engineering students were given problems specifically designed to have no perfect solution, forcing them to innovate. The humans had taught them something valuable. That advancement was not just about developing better tools, but about developing better thinking. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Jake and his team were debriefed by every space agency and government that could get someone into the room. They told their story repeatedly, showed their recordings of the Viridian glory, shared every detail of the technology they had seen. But they also emphasized Thexin's wisdom in not sharing that technology directly. Humanity needed to develop at its own pace, learn its own lessons, make its own mistakes. The quick fix of advanced alien technology would rob humanity of the journey that made it strong. They could give us quantum drives tomorrow, Riley told a gathering of scientists and engineers. They could hand us technology that would take us centuries to develop on our own. But then we'd just be copying their homework. We wouldn't really understand it. We'd be dependent on them, and we'd lose what makes us valuable: our ability to solve problems creatively. The message resonated. Rather than demanding alien technology, humanity doubled down on its own research and development. But now they did it with new confidence, knowing that their approach to engineering, practical, flexible, adaptable, was not inferior to more advanced species. It was different, and that difference had value. Years passed. Humanity continued its expansion into space, developing new technologies through hard work and ingenuity. They built better spacecraft, established colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter, created technologies that would have seemed miraculous decades earlier. And one day, a human ship equipped with an experimental, faster-than-light drive, primitive by Corvani standards but functional, arrived at a Corvani trading station. The crew requested permission to dock, and when the station master asked their purpose, the captain replied simply, "We came to say hello properly, and to offer our assistance if anyone needs a mechanic." The story of how humans had saved the Viridian glory had become legend among the Corvani. When word spread that a human vessel had arrived, dozens of ships changed course to meet them. The humans were welcomed not as primitives to be pitied or protected, but as equals who had proven their worth. Thexin, now an admiral in the Corvani fleet, personally greeted the human delegation. He recognized their approach to engineering everywhere he looked now, in the way Corvani ships were designed with more redundancy and flexibility, in the way engineers were trained to think creatively when systems failed, in the improvised solutions that had saved countless lives since that day in an unnamed system. "You changed us," Thexin told the human captain, a woman named Commander Lisa Torres. "You showed us that we had become too dependent on perfection, too rigid in our thinking. You reminded us that true engineering is not about having the perfect tool for every job, but about making any tool work for the job at hand." "And you changed us too," Torres replied. "You showed us what we could become if we keep pushing forward. You gave us a glimpse of our potential future. But more than that, you had the wisdom to let us get there on our own terms, at our own pace. That's a gift worth more than any technology." As the two species began formal relations, exchanging knowledge and culture, both benefited. The Corvani learned flexibility and creative thinking from humanity. Humans learned advanced scientific principles and gained insights into technologies they were still developing. But the most important exchange was philosophical. The Corvani had been reminded that advancement was not just about better tools, but about better thinking. Humanity had been shown that their practical, improvisational approach to problems was not a sign of primitiveness, but a strength that even highly advanced civilizations could learn from. In the years that followed, human mechanics became sought after throughout the galaxy. When sophisticated systems failed in ways that proper repair protocols could not address, the call went out for humans who could look at a problem with fresh eyes and find a solution that worked, even if it was not elegant. The galaxy learned that sometimes the best answer to a complex problem was not more sophistication, but more creativity. That precision tools were valuable, but flexible thinking was priceless. That advancement measured only in technology missed the equally important advancement of practical wisdom. And somewhere in that unnamed system where it had all begun, a small monument was placed by mutual agreement between humanity and the Corvani Empire. It marked the spot where an alien ship had broken down and where humans had proven that help given freely, without expectation of reward, was a universal language that transcended technology and culture. The inscription was simple, written in both human languages and Corvani script. Here, two species met, not as superior and inferior, but as people helping people. Here, humanity showed the galaxy that true advancement is measured not by the sophistication of our tools, but by the strength of our character and the flexibility of our minds. Here, the galaxy learned that sometimes the best mechanic is not the one with perfect equipment, but the one who refuses to give up. Jake Rodriguez, now retired but still teaching young engineers, kept a hologram of that monument on his desk. When students asked him what his greatest accomplishment had been, he did not talk about the awards or the recognition or the place in history books. He talked about a crew of aliens, stranded and afraid, who had sent out a call for help. And he talked about a team of humans who had answered that call, not because they expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. That's what engineering is really about, he would tell them. It's not about building perfect machines. It's about solving problems for people who need help. And sometimes the most advanced solution in the galaxy is also the simplest. When someone calls for help, you answer. And then you do whatever it takes to fix what's broken. That lesson, more than any technology or scientific principle, became humanity's gift to the galaxy. The understanding that tools serve people, not the other way around. That sophistication without adaptability is fragile. That the willingness to help others, even at cost to yourself, is the foundation of civilization. The Corvani never forgot the day humans saved them with primitive tools and creative thinking. And humanity never forgot that being less advanced did not mean being less capable. Both species grew stronger from the encounter, learning from each other in ways that went far beyond technology. In the end, the broken ship that had seemed like a disaster became the beginning of something greater. A friendship between species based on mutual respect, a sharing of not just knowledge, but wisdom, and the understanding that sometimes being stranded with a broken ship is exactly where you need to be to learn the most important lessons.